He had wealth, fame, and arrogance, but he forgot one thing: never underestimate a wife pushed too far. The camera pans across a grand, echoing courtroom lined with wooden benches and towering marble columns. The air is thick with whispers and flashing lights from press photographers stationed at the back. Reporters murmur into microphones, catching what they can of this high-profile divorce hearing that has caught the attention of an entire nation. The door opens quietly but firmly, and all eyes shift. A woman walks in, tall, poised, and wrapped in quiet grace. It's Emily. Her steps are calm, deliberate. She wears a simple yet elegant navy blue dress that flows just below the knee, heels clicking softly against the courtroom floor. There's something magnetic about her presence, subtle, yet commanding. It's not glamour that makes heads turn, it's the undeniable strength radiating from her expression. Her eyes scan the room, but they don't linger on the cameras or the audience. They settle only briefly on the man seated near the front. Nathan. Once revered in the business world as a tech tycoon and philanthropist, Nathan now looks unsure. He shifts uncomfortably in his custom-tailored suit, glancing at his high-profile lawyer, his usual smirk notably absent. Emily walks past him without a flicker of emotion, taking her seat beside her own attorney, Sarah Whitmore, who offers her a reassuring nod. The judge's bench is still empty, but the tension is already suffocating. In the corner of the room, someone whispers, "That's her, the wife he called unattractive in public." Another replies, "She doesn't look so unattractive to me." The courtroom doors close with a dull thud, sealing in the anticipation. What the world doesn't know yet is that this isn't just a divorce hearing, it's a reckoning. And by the end of it, the millionaire won't just lose money. He'll lose his power, his pride, and the illusion that he could belittle her and walk away untouched. Before the courtroom lights and the media frenzy, there was just Emily, young, full of color and dreams, with paint-stained fingertips and a heart that pulsed for creativity. She was an artist who saw the world in shades and stories, not numbers and spreadsheets. When she met Nathan, he was charismatic and brilliant, already making waves in the tech world with a startup that promised to revolutionize how people connected. He was intense and driven, and he loved how different she was from the world he navigated. She balanced him. In the beginning, it was love laced with laughter, promises made under fairy lights, and kisses between gallery showings and coding marathons. They weren't just in love, they believed they were building something rare, something untouchable. But like all stories that change, it happened gradually. After they married, Emily put her brushes away more often. At first, it was by choice, a pause to support Nathan during crucial investor pitches, a postponement of her gallery opening to help with logistics at his launch party. Then came Lily, their daughter, her tiny cries rearranging every priority. Emily threw herself into motherhood with the same passion she once reserved for her canvas. She memorized feeding schedules instead of color palettes, and replaced her studio with a nursery bathed in soft light and lullabies. She told herself it was worth it, that art could wait, but childhood couldn't. Nathan, meanwhile, grew more successful, more involved in his empire, and less present at home. His time, once shared generously, became rationed. Texts went unanswered. Dinners grew silent. Emily often found herself alone at events she helped plan, smiling politely while making excuses for her husband's absence. Over the years, the house they lived in grew larger, but the space between them stretched wider. Nathan, though never openly cruel at first, became emotionally distant. He stopped asking about her work, stopped noticing the details she once felt proud of. Her haircut? Ignored. Her homemade anniversary gift? Forgotten on the counter. She'd sit at the edge of their bed some nights, holding Lily's tiny socks after a long day, feeling invisible. She didn't cry every night, but she did often wonder when exactly her partnership became a one-sided arrangement. She held on, telling herself this was a phase, that once Lily was older or Nathan's work settled, things would return to how they were. After all, he still provided. He hadn't left. That had to count for something, didn't it? But it wasn't the absence of shouting that made it okay. It was the silence that screamed. The quiet neglect, the lack of appreciation, the subtle shifts that made her feel like a fixture in her own home instead of a person. Yet Emily remained loyal. She believed in the vows she took, and more importantly, in the family she tried to keep intact. She never badmouthed Nathan to Lily. She kept up appearances for the world, always presenting a composed exterior, even when her heart was quietly unraveling behind closed doors. And in the moments when it felt unbearable, she painted, sometimes in secret, sometimes in stolen moments between naps and laundry, because that was the one place she still felt like herself. A woman with a voice, even if no one was listening. She told herself she was doing it for Lily. But a part of her was still doing it for Nathan too, hoping he'd one day look up from his screen, see her again, and remember who they used to be. The night of the charity gala was meant to be one of elegance and celebration. The event was hosted at a 5-star hotel downtown, the ballroom draped in gold and ivory, crystal chandeliers sparkling like stars overhead. It was the kind of evening where cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and the city's most powerful gathered to congratulate themselves. Emily stood by Nathan's side in a soft wine-red gown, her hair pinned back in a graceful updo. She had spent hours getting ready, not just for the cameras, but because she still wanted to feel beautiful for him. It had been a long time since they attended an event together, and she hoped maybe tonight would be different. Maybe he'd hold her hand again like he used to. Maybe he'd introduce her with pride. But as the night wore on, Nathan gravitated toward his circle of tech investors and industry influencers, glass in hand, laughter too loud. Emily stayed nearby, offering polite smiles, but rarely included. When a young woman with a tight black dress and a surgically sculpted face complimented Nathan on his achievements in charm, someone jokingly asked, "How does your wife keep up with you?" Nathan chuckled, barely glancing in Emily's direction, and responded, loud enough for the group and cameras nearby, "Well, she's not the hottest wife, but she's a good mom." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, it was casual. That's what made it worse. No one thought twice. To them, it was just a joke. Emily froze, wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. Her cheeks flushed, but not from embarrassment. It was a numb heat, the kind that doesn't sting immediately but settles deep in the chest. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry. She just excused herself, claiming she needed to check on Lily with the sitter, and quietly stepped outside. What she didn't know was that someone had captured the moment on video. A guest live streaming the event had zoomed in just enough, and within hours, the clip was shared across social media with captions like "Millionaire husband's brutal joke about wife" and "She's just a good mom, apparently." Emily saw the clip the next morning, alone in the kitchen, phone in hand while Lily colored at the table. It played on loop, each replay slicing deeper than the last. The way he grinned, the way the crowd laughed, how casually he dismissed her existence, her identity boiled down to a footnote, a backhanded compliment, an afterthought. She stared at the screen, not blinking. And in that silence, a voiceover would later narrate, she wasn't angry, not yet. But that night, something inside her shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was the quiet cracking of a woman's patience, the slow awakening of someone who had been holding on for too long. For the first time in years, Emily didn't feel sad or confused. She felt clear. She saw exactly where she stood in his world, and knew it was time to step out of it. In the weeks following the gala, Emily withdrew, not in defeat, but in preparation. She stopped waiting for apologies or explanations. She stopped rehearsing confrontations in her head or hoping he'd walk in with a bouquet and regret in his eyes. Instead, she started listening to the silence, and for the first time, she heard her own voice inside it. Mornings no longer began with checking Nathan's calendar or arranging Lily's day around his meetings. They began with her. She started waking up early to walk around the park, letting the cool morning air clear her thoughts. She changed her diet, not to lose weight for him, but to feel strong for herself. She bought a new sketchbook and oils she hadn't touched in years and began painting again, messy, vibrant pieces that didn't try to please anyone. At first, it felt strange, this sudden shift from survival to self-respect. But soon it became ritual. She reclaimed corners of her life that had long been taken for granted. She laughed more with Lily. She redecorated the guest room into a mini art studio. She stopped responding to Nathan's half-hearted check-ins with enthusiasm and instead answered with calm neutrality. He barely noticed. Caught up in the storm of his company's newest AI product launch, he was giving interviews on morning television, dining with investors, and smiling for magazine covers that called him the golden visionary of tech. While he stood under bright lights, Emily moved in shadows, collecting herself piece by piece. One Tuesday afternoon, while Lily was at school, she booked an appointment under a false name and visited the office of Sarah Whitmore, a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney known for protecting women's rights. Emily sat across from her, nervous but steady, and began detailing a quiet history of emotional neglect. There were no bruises. No shouting matches. Just years of diminishing, dismissing, and dehumanizing. Times he told her she was lucky he stayed, that she shouldn't complain about her lifestyle. Times he mocked her art, called it decor, or worse, a cute hobby. Sarah listened carefully, asking measured questions, then slid a file toward her and gently said, "We can build this. But you'll need to be strong." Emily didn't flinch. She nodded. "I'm ready to be seen again." Over the next few weeks, she quietly compiled evidence, emails, messages, financial documents, recordings of conversations where he minimized her, even a copy of the viral clip. She didn't announce her plans. She didn't change her tone. She smiled at dinner, packed school lunches, and kept the house warm and calm for Lily. But every night after bedtime stories, she reviewed documents, met with Sarah, and wrote in her journal. The transformation wasn't just external. It was internal, a shift from doubt to determination. Nathan remained oblivious. He posed on red carpets, laughed during team retreats, and toasted champagne while his wife quietly documented his undoing. He saw her newfound stillness as passivity, her silence as surrender. He couldn't see the storm quietly brewing behind her composed face. He couldn't hear the armor being built in every therapist session she attended or the steady hum of strength in her newly returned art. While he bathed in validation from strangers, Emily was slowly, methodically, becoming someone he no longer recognized. Someone who no longer needed his approval or his presence. And as she painted in her studio one evening, finishing a canvas that pulsed with bold reds and fierce blues, she looked at her reflection in the window. Not the reflection of a wife, or a mother, or a shadow. But a woman waking up. A woman building her way out. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind Nathan usually spent breezing through high-level meetings and signing off on corporate decisions before heading to lunch at a private club. As he sat in his home office, scrolling through market projections on his tablet, a firm knock echoed through the marble-floored hallway. One of the house staff appeared at the door with a puzzled expression and a cream envelope marked with legal insignia. Nathan glanced at it, brows lifting as if it were some clerical error. He opened the envelope lazily, then paused. His eyes scanned the document once, twice, then a third time, slower each time. Divorce. It wasn't a threat, not a bluff, not a conversation starter. It was formal, signed, filed, and real. Emily had served him. For a moment, he chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "She's bluffing," he muttered. "She's emotional. She won't survive without my money." There was arrogance in his tone, the same dismissive air he used when belittling competitors. But beneath that smirk, something shifted in his jaw. A flash of discomfort flickered across his features. Because Emily had never made hollow moves before, and this felt deliberate. Too deliberate. He marched to the kitchen, holding the papers like they were something flammable. Emily stood by the window, pouring Lily a glass of orange juice as the morning sunlight streamed in. Her expression was calm, serene, even. She didn't look like someone afraid or unsure. She looked ready. When he held out the papers and said, "What is this supposed to be?" she didn't flinch. "It's exactly what it says," she replied. "I'm done pretending this is a marriage." Nathan scoffed, waving the papers. "You're seriously going to try and take this to court? You don't have anything. You don't even work. But Emily didn't raise her voice. She simply smiled and said, "You've been so busy not noticing me, Nathan, you didn't see what I've built." And she had built something more than he ever gave her credit for. Attached to those divorce documents were claims that stunned even his legal team. She was asking for full custody of Lily, the house they lived in, and most shocking of all, full ownership of her newly launched gallery startup. A business she had quietly registered months ago, now with a growing online following, pending partnerships, and capital investment. The same project he once mocked as a little hobby to keep you busy. Suddenly, it was a legal entity with revenue potential. He underestimated her, and now it was costing him. He assumed she'd crumble without his resources. He assumed she'd never fight back. But the woman standing in front of him wasn't the same Emily he married. She had learned to navigate a world that didn't clap for her. And now, she had a team, a plan, and her dignity intact. Nathan stared at her, unable to read her anymore. The power dynamic had shifted, and he knew it. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was done. This wasn't an argument. This was her exit. And all he could do was watch as the foundation of his perfect life began to crack, and realize too late that she had quietly lit the first match. The day of the court hearing arrived with an almost surreal calmness. Emily stepped out of the sleek black car in front of the courthouse, the morning sunlight glinting off the towering glass and stone facade. She was calm, composed, and dressed with quiet dignity, a tailored charcoal gray dress that hugged her frame modestly, paired with low heels and minimal jewelry. Her hair was neatly styled, and her makeup subtle yet polished, giving her a glow not of vanity, but of inner strength. As she walked up the courthouse steps, dozens of cameras flashed, reporters whispered questions she didn't answer, and strangers' eyes searched for any sign of weakness. But Emily held her head high, unfazed. This was her moment, not just a legal battle, but a public reclaiming of her identity. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Nathan entered shortly after, accompanied by a high-profile celebrity lawyer whose reputation for crushing opponents preceded him. Nathan's confident smirk and effortless charm filled the room. He shook hands with his lawyer, sat down with a relaxed posture, and seemed ready to dismiss the whole affair as a mere inconvenience. His presence commanded attention, and the murmurs in the courtroom hinted that many expected the millionaire to win easily. After all, he had the money, the influence, and the public's fascination on his side. But Emily's lawyer, Sarah Whitmore, had spent months preparing a case far more compelling than anyone expected. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood with authority and addressed the judge clearly and calmly. She outlined a timeline that pulled back the curtain on Nathan's public and private behavior. Sarah recounted the viral moment at the charity gala when Nathan publicly belittled Emily, calling her not the hottest wife but a good mom. That clip, once dismissed as a joke by Nathan, had left emotional scars. Sarah then detailed the years of emotional neglect, how Nathan ignored Emily's contributions to their family and dismissed her efforts as inconsequential. She spoke about the countless nights Emily spent alone caring for their daughter, the sacrifices she made putting her own dreams on hold, and the verbal jabs Nathan threw her way, often masked as humor but deeply hurtful. The courtroom listened, rapt, as Sarah presented evidence, emails where Nathan belittled Emily's business ideas, text messages revealing disdain for her feelings, and financial documents showing Emily's significant unpaid work supporting his ventures. The judge nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the gravity of these revelations. Then, in a dramatic turn, Sarah played a hidden video clip that had surfaced during their investigation. It showed Nathan mocking Emily behind closed doors in a private moment, far from any audience, exposing the true nature of his contempt. The video was raw, Nathan laughing derisively as he mimicked Emily's efforts to contribute to his success, calling her just a distraction. The room fell silent, the judge's eyes narrowing as the arrogance and cruelty on the screen became undeniable. Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the confident mask slipping ever so slightly. For the first time, the millionaire seemed vulnerable. The public image he had carefully crafted was cracking. The judge leaned forward and asked pointed questions, signaling that this was no longer a simple custody or asset dispute. It was a serious case exposing emotional abuse and disrespect at its core. Emily sat still, her expression steady but her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and anticipation. This was the moment she had prepared for. She was no longer the invisible wife or the unattractive mom Nathan had dismissed. She was a force in her own right, one demanding justice, respect, and recognition. The courtroom drama had only just begun, and already, the tides were turning. When the judge finally called Emily to the stand, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with anticipation, the buzz of whispered conversations quieting into a heavy silence. Emily rose from her seat, walking forward with steady steps, her eyes clear and unwavering. She looked around the room, not with anger or resentment, but with a quiet dignity that commanded attention. This was her moment to tell her story, not through the filter of others' opinions or public gossip, but in her own voice. She began by recounting the earliest days after Lily's birth, a time she described as both beautiful and painfully transformative. "After I gave birth," she said softly, "Nathan called me unattractive. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. He used my postpartum body and exhaustion as weapons, words meant to cut deeper than any physical wound. He told me I was lucky he stayed, that I should be grateful for what I had, even when I felt invisible." Her voice trembled briefly, but she quickly steadied herself, determined not to break under the weight of those memories. Emily explained how Nathan's cruelty wasn't limited to private insults. He turned her love for their daughter into a weapon against her. He would say things like, "If you cared about Lily, you wouldn't ask for more," or, "Your feelings don't matter, only the family's image does." I was expected to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, silent and compliant, even as I felt myself fading away. She paused, looking directly at Nathan, who sat across the courtroom, his usual smug expression replaced by something unreadable. Despite the pain, Emily's tone was composed. She made it clear she wasn't there to seek sympathy, but justice and understanding. "I may not be the woman he married," she declared, voice strong and unwavering, "but I am the woman who raised his child, built his home, and stood by him in every storm." The courtroom fell completely silent. Not a single person dared breathe. The weight of those words hung in the air like a heavy fog, settling on everyone present. Emily went on to describe the countless sacrifices she made, the dreams shelved, and the emotional labor that went unnoticed and unappreciated. She shared stories of nights spent comforting Lily alone, of missing her own passions, and of enduring Nathan's dismissiveness without complaint. "I was expected to be invisible, to disappear behind his shadow," she said, "but I have finally found my light." Her testimony was raw but poised, a delicate balance between vulnerability and strength. She recounted specific moments where Nathan's words and actions made her question her worth, but also moments where she found courage in her own resilience. "Love should not be a weapon," she told the court. "It should be a foundation." Throughout her testimony, Emily's lawyer, Sarah, watched closely, ready to provide support if needed but confident in her client's ability to carry the story. Observers in the courtroom, journalists, family members, and even Nathan's own legal team, shifted in their seats, visibly affected by the honesty and emotion laid bare before them. As Emily finished, the judge's expression softened, nodding slowly as if acknowledging not just the facts presented, but the deeper truth of a woman reclaiming her dignity and voice. Nathan looked down, unable to meet her gaze. The room remained silent long after Emily returned to her seat, the impact of her words reverberating through the walls. This was the turning point, not just in the trial, but in the story of two people whose marriage had been defined by power and pain. Emily's testimony marked the moment the scales began to tip. She was no longer just the unattractive mom Nathan had mocked, she was a woman who had endured, grown, and risen. In the courtroom, and the world, were finally listening. Nathan sat rigid in his chair, the confident facade he'd worn throughout the trial beginning to crumble. When the judge turned to him and asked if he wished to speak, he straightened his tie, took a slow breath, and responded with a shaky smile, "Your Honor, it was just a joke. I never meant to hurt Emily." It was said in jest, something blown out of proportion by the media and the opposing counsel. His voice, though steady, betrayed a hint of desperation. "We all say things we don't mean in private. I love my wife and daughter. I regret if my words were taken the wrong way." The courtroom remained silent, absorbing his words. Then the judge leaned forward, his tone sharp and unyielding. "Mr. Anderson," he began, "this case is not about a misunderstood joke. It is about the emotional abuse and neglect that Mrs. Anderson has endured for years. Emotional abuse is a serious and often overlooked form of cruelty. It chips away at a person's self-worth, erodes the foundation of a family, and leaves scars that are invisible but profound." The judge's eyes scanned Nathan's face, which now showed signs of discomfort and guilt. "Your dismissive attitude, your public humiliation of your wife, and your disregard for her contributions have been documented clearly in this trial. This court cannot condone behavior that belittles, devalues, and emotionally wounds a spouse. The fact that you attempt to minimize these actions as jokes only underscores a lack of accountability that has permeated your marriage." The judge paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "Marriage is a partnership built on respect, support, and dignity. When one partner repeatedly undermines the other, the damage is not just personal but legal. This court must protect those who have been marginalized and silenced." Turning to the court clerk, the judge announced the verdict. "Based on the evidence presented, the court awards Mrs. Emily Anderson 70% of the marital assets. Custody of their daughter Lily is granted solely to Mrs. Anderson, with reasonable visitation rights to Mr. Anderson. Additionally, full ownership and control of Mrs. Anderson's gallery startup, which has been proven a legitimate and growing enterprise, shall be recognized under her name." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the moment this monumental decision was made. Emily's eyes shimmered with quiet relief as she nodded in gratitude toward her lawyer, Sarah, who offered a proud smile in return. Nathan lowered his head, the weight of the judge's words pressing down on him like a physical force. The millionaire who once held the world in his hands now seemed diminished, his power and control slipping away in real time. His once bold posture collapsed into defeat, and the carefully constructed image of dominance and invincibility was shattered. No amount of wealth could shield him from the consequences of his actions. As he sat silently, the room witnessed not a triumphant man, but a humbled one, brought low not by external enemies, but by the truth laid bare in the courtroom. The shame was palpable, hanging thickly in the air as he absorbed the reality that he had lost more than money or assets. He had lost respect, trust, and the illusion of control. Emily, meanwhile, stood with renewed strength. The verdict was not just a legal victory, it was a validation of her journey, her endurance, and her reclaiming of self-worth. As she left the courtroom, surrounded by the soft buzz of reporters' questions, she held her head high, ready to face whatever came next with dignity and grace. The millionaire's collapse was complete, and the story of the unattractive mom who made him kneel had reached its powerful conclusion. As the news of the court verdict spread, social media exploded with reactions that ranged from shock to celebration. Hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #UnattractiveMomVictory began trending within hours, with thousands of users sharing their own stories of overcoming emotional abuse and standing up to toxic relationships. Support poured in from every corner of the internet. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people alike expressed admiration for Emily's courage and resilience. Memes celebrating her strength circulated widely, often paired with images of Emily looking serene and empowered, contrasted sharply with pictures of Nathan looking defeated. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, hungry for headlines that capture the dramatic rise and fall in this high-profile divorce. Articles ran with bold titles like "The Unattractive Mom Who Took Down a Millionaire" and "How Emily Anderson Reclaimed Her Life from a Tycoon's Cruelty." Talk shows debated the case, dissecting the emotional abuse aspect and highlighting the often hidden struggles many endure behind closed doors. Opinion pieces praised Emily for refusing to stay silent and for using the legal system to fight back against emotional neglect and belittlement. Nathan, meanwhile, became the subject of ridicule and public scrutiny. Social media users turned him into a symbol of arrogance brought low, creating satirical videos and memes that mocked his fall from grace. The tech community that once admired him began distancing themselves, and some investors quietly pulled support from his ventures. His carefully cultivated image of the untouchable millionaire was now replaced by that of a cautionary tale about the dangers of entitlement and disrespect. Throughout the frenzy, Emily remained remarkably composed. She declined every interview request, refusing to turn her personal pain into entertainment. Instead, she issued a brief but powerful statement through her attorney: "My silence was strength. My truth was enough." Those few words resonated deeply with many, becoming a mantra for others facing similar battles. Emily chose to let her actions and art speak for her, rather than engaging in the noise surrounding the case. In the midst of the media storm, it was clear that Emily's story had touched a nerve. It wasn't just about a millionaire and his wife, it was about respect, dignity, and the courage to stand up when the world tries to silence you. The public's overwhelming support became a testament to how much people crave stories of real strength and redemption, proving that sometimes, the most powerful voices are the quietest ones. The soft hum of conversation filled the spacious room as guests moved quietly between gleaming walls adorned with Emily's art. This was her first solo gallery opening, a dream she had shelved for years but never forgotten. The space was bathed in warm light, each painting telling a story of pain, healing, and rebirth. Emily stood near the entrance, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. Beside her, Lily clung to her hand, her bright eyes wide with excitement as she pointed at colorful canvases that seemed to dance with life. It was a moment of victory not just for Emily, but for the little family she had fought so hard to protect and rebuild. The doorbell chimed softly, and Sarah Whitmore, her steadfast lawyer and confidant, stepped inside carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers. Emily's face lit up with a genuine smile as Sarah approached, the unspoken bond between them palpable. "I thought you might need these today," Sarah said warmly, handing over the blooms. Emily accepted them with gratitude, her eyes reflecting the countless hours of struggle and preparation that had led to this day. "Thank you, Sarah, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Guests mingled, admiring the collection that Emily had titled Resilience. Each portrait captured a different facet of strength, faces marked by tears and triumph, colors that spoke of endurance and hope. As Emily moved through the gallery, she paused in front of a large canvas, a self-portrait bathed in shades of deep blue and fiery red, eyes fierce yet calm. It was her story in paint, the story of a woman who had faced despair but refused to be defined by it. Lily tugged at her sleeve, pulling her back to the present, and Emily knelt to hug her tightly. "We did this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This gallery was more than a showcase, it was a declaration that she had reclaimed her identity, her passion, and her future. As the evening drew to a close, a voiceover echoed softly over the scene, capturing the essence of Emily's journey. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. In that moment, Emily was no longer just a woman who had been called unattractive. She was a beacon of strength and transformation, a reminder that true power comes not from loud declarations, but from quiet, unwavering resolve. Every woman deserves respect, not just when she's glowing in her brightest moments, but especially when she's growing through life's hardest challenges. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't measured by outward appearances or silence in the face of hardship, but by the courage to stand up for oneself, to reclaim dignity, and to build a better future despite the odds. Emotional abuse often goes unseen, whispered behind closed doors, but it leaves deep wounds that affect every part of a person's life. No one should have to endure belittlement, neglect, or disrespect from those who are supposed to love and protect them. If you or someone you know is facing emotional abuse, remember you are not alone. Reach out, seek support, and never let anyone diminish your worth. Healing begins with finding your voice and knowing that you deserve to be heard. Inner strength can transform pain into power, just like Emily did. Her journey shows that silence isn't weakness, it can be the quiet foundation of resilience that leads to justice and self-empowerment. If you believe in standing up against emotional abuse and honoring the strength of women everywhere, please like this video, comment respect to show your support, and share this story with others who need to hear it. Together, we can raise awareness, break the silence, and create a world where every woman is valued for who she truly is, inside and out.